G'day folks, Mark here again. Just doing an update on the firearms regulation situation or the political situation for firearms and firearms enthusiasts in Western Australia, what our regs are, and I suppose there's a few things. I've done a few videos to try and explain a little bit of stuff. There's a lot of people that don't want to listen to the whole thing. There's a lot of people that I don't say enough of, but there's a fair few questions showing up and I want to try and cover those. So I'm going to put a bit more time into this video and break it down to, I suppose, three main sections. One would be what the regs are, that everyone wants to know what the details are. I'll get into it in a bit more detail in a little bit, but it's not simple. There isn't any simple answers here. The answers aren't out there. You can go online and get a info sheet on it, but it's not as simple as that. So there isn't any simple answers there as yet. And I'll go through and try and help as to what to do about that, or explain it a bit more in a little bit. The other thing is to explain the situation a bit more. I think there's a lot of just waking up that's going on, but to explain the political situation, which this is a political situation. It's legal, it's police, it's gun regulations, but it is largely a political situation, and explain that as to what it is. And then what to do. What can we do about this? What should we be doing about it? And so I'll go into that. So I've got a whole little bunch of scratchy notes over here that I'll go through and try and make sure I go through those details. To start off with, as I said, the regulations, what they are, we don't really know. There's a few details involved with this. One is there isn't anyone to go and explain it. So be it the gun groups, be it the dealers, be it whoever wants to go and find out, there isn't anyone to answer any questions at this moment. Yes, it has been dropped in an info form. Yes, you can sort of see what it is, but anyone who's gone and read it realizes that it's written in legal terms, and there's a lot of confusion to go with that sort of stuff. There's people saying, oh look, I can see a Howard 1500 written in there, you're not allowed that, or a Remington 700, not allowed that. If that's a fairly simple one, if you read properly, it says a Howard 1500 chambered, I don't know the actual phrase, but what it means is chambered in one of the banned cartridges. These are regulations that came into place 2 years ago. All us guys with big firearms and big cartridges had to deal with that process. It did not mean that a Howard 1500 action was banned. It meant a Howard 1500 rifle with a whatever it was, one of the banned cartridges was banned. That wasn't allowed to be here. But you could rechamber that barrel. You could take that barrel out and get a gunsmith to do up a barrel with a legal chamber, put it in that action's fine. So you've got a 6.5 Creedmoor in Howard 1500 or a 308 Creedmoor in, 308 Winchester in a Remington 700. That's not banned, that's not illegal, that's not whatsoever. So it's good that people woke up. It's disappointing that people had to see their cartridge, their rifle in there before they woke up at all. They didn't care when they were being gunned. Otherwise, that's disheartening, but that's the nature of I suppose, West Australia to some degree or another. But the big picture, what I'm talking about there with the regulations is, not only do we not have it to where it's been, where you need a lawyer to try and figure it all out, or need their people who wrote it to try and figure it out, is the way the West Australian Police Department has functioned for as long as I've dealt with them, is they interpret it. So it might be written a particular way, but they still have to interpret it. So we don't have proper answers in that situation, simple as that, and there's no way you're going to get proper answers until this starts to be actioned. It still actually starts to be actioned, and then it is interpreted. So that sounds really grim, because then we're all going to wait for this surprise. In a quick note on that sort of front, there will be grace periods with all this sort of stuff. So as much as that's going to the worst case scenario, it all goes through regardless, there's still going to, if everything goes as bad as it possibly can, and the worst dreams are realized as to what could be, there still is a grace period. You're not instantly a criminal, and stop behaving that way. You're not a criminal. You're not instantly a criminal. It doesn't change overnight. There will be a grace period to go with this side of things. So that's the fundamentals of it. What the regulations are, to me, it's a little bit the semantics at this stage, because that's several levels down this track of where we would hope it to go. And it needs to go through the process of what they actually turn it into. like I just said, with those actions being banned, to start off with, the police went with, oh, the action's banned, that's what it is. And then when it actually got challenged at all, the case of, okay, well, that's not the case. Yes, we will let this happen. Because they didn't know. They were really just reading off information sheets themselves, and until it actually got pushed, they didn't know. So that's for that one there. You're not going to find those answers, but don't panic about it and that sort of stuff. The next one there as to, and I suppose a big one I want to explain, which fits a little bit into what we should do as well. It is definitely coming out of those brackets, but need to understand this situation. And like I said, it is a political situation what we're in. And it's been coming for a long time. It's been coming for, I don't know how many years, forever in some senses, but it really stepped up around the sort of maybe 5-6 years ago, but particularly 4 years ago, particularly just after the last election. And what I suppose the things that the average person doesn't realise is it first really stepped up in places. Yes, they were in plan to enact the buybacks and the bans and that sort of stuff. That was all part of this brew. But it started with really reinterpreting laws to then impact shipping and to try and make it really hard for guns to be for manufacturers or for dealers and for your gun shop and that sort of stuff to get firearms, to sell firearms, to buy firearms. They really started to limit it through pressuring the likes of Australia Post and under a reinterpretation of the law. This was all done to make it more difficult. There is also, in a far bigger picture than that, there is worldwide freight that have issues with transporting guns. There's lots of other logic to go behind that, but there is big issues to do it, and it's all politically motivated without any question. But right down to banks, there are a lot of companies that deal or manufacture, and the likes of banks, the likes of getting finance, the likes of getting, even simply being able to get your bills paid, be able to actually trade. A lot of institutions, bank cards and bits and pieces. I don't know all the ones that was involved, but the credit companies and that sort of stuff, just to let businesses trade, they would step back. They wouldn't support it. That sort of stuff. That sort of thing that you hear about, whether it's Nigel Farage or whatever it is, and you hear about banks not being able to look after anymore. Well, that's been happening in the gun industry for a long time. It happens, there's other industries that get impacted as well, but the gun industry was one of the first candidates to really see that sort of stuff. So this pressure's been coming from a long way. But at 4 years ago, there was the start of an anti-gun propaganda system that really started to push out of our state government. Now that might not be so obvious to start off with, but there's a very simple strategy. If you step back and look at the political situation, the biggest ever the landslide victory that Labor saw, the biggest ever victory they ever saw, was last time. That's why the Labor government got in with such strength, and so that's why they're being able to do. And there's lots of things, not just gun folks getting hit by this. That's all of our basically freedoms, I suppose you'd call it, whether it's hiking or whether it was the forward driving or fishing or the farmers or whatever it was. Labor has, and anyone who's paying attention knows that Labor's been quite blunt about dealing with that sort of stuff. There is a lot of pushing things through Parliament, ignoring things. There's a lot of messing things up too. The likes of the Cultural Rights Act or whatever it was that got walked back because it was such a mess not that long ago. But all this sort of stuff has been because they got in with so much power. And why did they get in with so much power? And you can go through the fact that, okay, Liberal didn't have much going on or blah, 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 blah. The big deal, their big sale, the big pitch they had was, we saved you from COVID. There was the threat of COVID and we saved you. So that was, at least in their minds, one of the biggest sales pitches they ever did. They had now your opinion on COVID and that sort of stuff and what actually happened, what they did right, what they did wrong, all that sort of stuff. Another complete conversation. But the simple thing is to them is they took control of things. They definitely worked with the media to do what most governments did, to frighten people, to get more. There's the logic of getting more control and that sort of stuff. But realistically, they frightened him and they saved West Australia from that. That was the pitch. And to some degree or another, at least, and to some members to another, that was the valuable thing. So without COVID, what have you got to scare people? What have you got to do? Can you scare them about the crime or scare them about the drugs and fix that? Well, when you look at it, that's certainly not getting any better anywhere around our state to any large degree. And it's a hard thing to do. I'm not saying it isn't a hard thing to do. But if you can create a fear and then a perceived fear and then save the West Australians from that, that sort of sounds a little bit the same, doesn't it? So that's exactly what the gun community have been dealing with. 4 years ago, thereabouts, that's the strategy. We will paint the gun community as even worse, as even more a threat, as this perceived threat of what's going to happen. These guns on the streets, these bad guys, we put out a thing with all these guns all over your state. This is all the same strategy. It's a fairly long haul. It's not in politics 4 years, but it's a fairly long haul of making us the bad guy. And then what we're doing things to save it. We're doing things to get guns off the streets. You have to also understand that the likes of the Labor Party, I don't know the numbers exactly, but it's up in the $200 million a year goes to advertising for media in Western Australia. Now, advertising, yeah, you can see that it's going to be fairly easy to see where our West Australian media knows their bread's buttered, and that doesn't mean they're corrupt by any means, but you can see there will be an influence to put that sort of stuff on. So certainly when it comes to the gun side of things, you can see that any gun incident is certainly elevated to the top of the page, or to the front of the paper, I should say. The likes of the amount of times the police minister is going on about what he's doing or about what bad they are, we all know that. We've seen that sort of stuff. So listen, that is when you understand the situation, this is a plan, and we need to build up the perceived threat, and we need to show that we're saving you. There's more things involved with that, with the likes of Mr. Papalia. I'm fairly certain to some degree or another, from what I've heard at least, is that he hopes to be the next Premier, and part of the plan is going into that as to how he's saving the state from these bad gun guys. So then you start to understand more why you feel like you do, and there's other things involved, I suppose, to go with that. But really what I want to try and say is that in that strategy, the paint the gun guys as the bad guys, paint guns as the bad. They're on the streets. We know they're not on the streets, but that's the rhetoric all the time. And then we're getting guns off the streets all the time. So that's saving West Australians. We're now in 60 days of the end game, which is very, very relevant. I want to say that for a very relevant reason. It's really good that people are waking up to the fact that it's them as well. There's over the period, whether it's the dealers that were getting hit and no one really cares, you know, they sort of know about it, but it's just a complaint. No, they're really getting pushed by regulations and that sort of stuff. When there's the caliber ban, there was a case of, oh yeah, we get it, no, and as much as the likes of myself explained, this isn't about these calibers. This is some guns for a same strategy, and there's more. They're going to go after all the rest if they can get them, which is still on the cards, by the way. Listen, no one really bothered. Now they're awake, and now, oh look, my gun's there, or the gun safe I've got to get, or all this thing. This is me that they're talking about. All of a sudden, people have woken up. So it's disappointing. It has to get to that where we can't see as a community, where we have to see as an individual. But okay, people have got busy lives or whatever that is. But think about that game. Think about the political strategy that's in play. What would be ideal after 4 years of saying they're the bad guys, and 4 years of saying we're trying to fix them, we're doing this sort of stuff, and after the election, if you let us in, we'll get those last regs, we'll get that last lot through, so it really gets to that place where we really can take even more of the firearms away. And of course, keep in mind, if they get away with this lot, they'll change those numbers not too far down the track, maybe to use in the next election. But what would be the ideal thing over the next 60 days to actually happen? Maybe a raucous and a bad asset at a rally, a bunch of guys shaking their fist, and the picture they need to say, here are the bad gun guys, here they are, we've got them. That will be, unless we're super careful in every step forward in this last 60 days, that will be used against us. That will not be a positive to show them that we really care. That will be far more a picture opportunity for them to say, look at the bad guys. So, or of course worse, or of course something horrible happens, someone pressured too far. You know, when you look at the deliberate pressure, the deliberate torture, the deliberate feeling of what people have been put through, of the Christmas emails and texts and that sort of stuff, and that sort of build up there. And you know, I suppose what I can say is I have seen, both in comments and in reaching out in other forms, there are stories of guys that really just handed in all their guns simply because they felt like criminals, because they were so pushed to the level where they couldn't do it anymore. They just felt like a criminal. They'd done nothing wrong. Some guys had only used the gun, or a gun, or one of the guns in a couple of times in the last 2 or 3 years, but they just felt like a criminal. They were in safes, that sort of stuff, but just went and handed in. I've heard stories of guys handing in heirlooms from First World War and from Second World War, from grandparents and great-grandparents, handing them in because they felt like a criminal. Now, that's a really bad situation. Listen, to be honest, it is what some of the hierarchy and the police minister are trying to create. I think it's more collateral damage. They're after much more this storyline, this impression. But some would argue that could be, you push people far enough, you make them feel bad enough, and they might just boil over and do something horrible out of constant persecution. And we don't know all that we're sent. We don't know all the letters that have been sent. We don't know all the other bits and pieces have been sent. We don't know how many people are being tortured in this fashion. So, but as horrible a thing is to say anything about it, talk about it even at all, is someone snaps, goes out, does a horrible thing with a firearm to themselves or to more than themselves or whatever. There's an event of some form or other. Perfect advertising, exactly the crescendo of that strategy. Make them bad guys, tell them they're bad guys, tell everyone they're bad guys, tell them all over the place, we're saving you, we're trying to save you, we're trying to save you. Just before the election, have an incident like that. Wouldn't that be a really good way to get a majority of government back in again? Now, I'm not saying that is the plan whatsoever. What I'm saying all that out loud for is we have to keep in mind, and this including, I've heard there's a rally coming up and that sort of stuff. I'm torn in that situation, because I totally feel it is so good that people are waking up and want to do something. That is so good, and that's so wonderful. The other side of things, I know, and no matter how I look at it, and I've spoken to a lot of people about this, and no matter how I look at it, I have to agree with what a lot of the people who are really involved with this say. The absolute best thing we can do right now is keep our heads down. Keep them down as low as I can. Don't give them the information. Don't give them, not the information, don't give them the situation. Don't give them that. You know, my thoughts on the rally side of things is, listen, go dressed bright and smart and sharp. Make sure you bring along a female, a child, or whatever it is with you. You're not a gang of guys standing around doing that sort of stuff. Make it as positive. Look, get some bouncy castles, whatever it is. Make it look really, really positive as for what we are as people, and we're standing there in polite, but in unanimous protest against what's actually happening. But every time I look at it, we don't know what's going on. We do know there is a political game plan. We do know this is a strategy. What's our chance of actually controlling it beyond the level of what we know? Like I said, the media, the people that you want to actually share with the rest of the world, at this stage at least, they're not on our side. The vast majority are. I don't want to, and I suppose I'll stop there for a minute and say another piece. And that is the media. I'm not saying all media are bad guys. I want to say the same thing for the police force. They're not all the bad guys. There are a lot of, I don't know the media very well. I know a few that are, I know of a few that are good guys for sure, but I know of the money side of things that drives us. There is definitely a large influence that the likes of the political system has on them, or the Labor Party has on them in this case. The police force, they're not all bad guys by any means. I know the police culture, the culture of the police force is really low. They're struggling to keep staff in there. They really are. They're importing from, I think, the UK sort of staff, trying to keep staff and that sort of stuff. They're struggling. and it is a mess of a situation when they're looking at new gun regulations, which are going to take a lot more, which are unsustainable to some degree or another, but they don't have the people to do this, and they have a terrible culture there. I know some police officers, some that are still there and struggling a little bit to try and do what they've got to do. I know a fair few that have gone because they've had enough. The culture there was just terrible. The top-down negative side to the culture of look at everyone as a criminal, you just got to catch them doing it, that sort of attitude, and I think a little bit of the gun side of things. You can look at it through the fact of we should be able to have them where we're doing nothing wrong, we're good guys, that sort of stuff. You know, in the worst of situations, then the licensed, experienced gun owners in the civilian population would be allies with the police force in darker times. Which, listen, look around the world, they're not that far away. It doesn't take too much of a political movement, and they come. So to look at us as the enemy, that's just a really bad culture, really bad place to be. But then when you have a situation where the culture is that everyone's a bad guy really, and you just got to catch them doing it, and they don't want to go out into the world. The average police officer doesn't want to go out there thinking there might be a gun pointing back at them. So I understand that. So part of the wish list out of the basic is if there's no firearms out there, then I don't have to worry about that. It's a very slippery slope to think down that road when only the controllers, only the elite, only the controllers have the firearms. Then, you know, you're basically a slave just after that, and that's the nature of humans. There's obviously some guys who've written some pretty good blogs that explain that sort of stuff, but that's part of where that stuff comes from. My main thing really, I'm sidetracking, come back to, I'm not saying all the people in the media are bad guys. I'm not saying all the police officers are bad guys any means. There is some, probably more at the top of the tree, that definitely have some agendas, and that is part of what we're seeing. So when it comes to whatever we're doing forward, and I suppose that's what I want to go forward and explain a little bit of going forward. How do you do this? So all I've said, and I really hate the feeling of even saying that right at the moment you should sit on your hands. I'm not saying that at all. I am saying be very aware of the situation and go into that with thought. And that's including talking to mates and all that sort of stuff, is to explain the situation. And certainly one of the things we should be doing is supporting each other. The main thing we can do is organise the voting side of things so we make sense of it. Voting is extraordinarily important, and really trying to change minds at this moment in any real level, we're not going to do it. We're not going to change the Labor voters' mind if they're not thinking down that road. We're not going to change them. Well, I say that in the fashion of the people that are going to vote Labor anyway, they're not going to change their mind. Coming together as a group, yes, I think that's good. Very, very much good. I would like to see also all of the pro-gun groups, and I'm not going to mention their names, but all of them all are doing good things in some fashions. I think some of them maybe, there's definitely ego involved with this, there's definitely agendas involved with this, there's definitely, and people would wonder what are they doing? What's all of these groups doing? All of them are doing a lot behind the scenes that is, I suppose, it comes into, it's a little bit like business. If you go and tell everyone what you're doing, when you're trying to influence a party to support the gun side of things, it doesn't always work as simple as telling everyone this is what we're doing. Because, and I don't know, they don't tell me either, don't get me wrong. I certainly get little whispers and bits and pieces, and I get little bits of information of we've done this, but we can't share that sort of stuff. So there is positive things happening. Is it all positive? No, I don't think it's all positive. I think egos, attitudes, and agendas definitely, and clashes between groups is a negative. So I think that's something that we should fix. As a community, we should fix. So yes, there's allowed to be differences of opinion, but we should all make sure we have a common goal and a common direction to make us far more effective. As for the individuals in groups, then there is places where joining a group, joining a club, that sort of stuff gives you more weight. It simply gives you more weight, gives them more weight, and will help us in fashions. I get it's not everyone's tea, but it is a cup of tea. But I get it is one of the things that we should be doing. We should be coming together, certainly supporting each other. There's been a lot of pressure on everyone. the likes of individual text, and I suppose that it does bug me. I get comments and bits and pieces from saying, oh, they're just trying to let you know, they're just trying to help you, that sort of stuff. This is the people who, I don't know what they do, whether they play golf or they just save up and go on holidays regularly, or they're I don't know, nature walkers, or I don't know what they do. But until you've had the police force texting you to tell you that you really should do this, even though it's not actually the law yet, you should do this, otherwise you may lose your rights to do that. And that includes, if you want to look at where the world's going, there's a thing called net zero. And net zero, actually, if you follow it all through, and there's lots of bits and pieces on the internet to help you understand what we're actually talking about, it goes into social credit score and that side of things, which is, okay, some people might think that's conspiracy theory. But if you think going to Bali or going overseas for 2 or 3 times a year is on the cards for a long time with the likes of this sort of government taking control of everything, it's not. They're going to take that away as well. There's lots of things coming, and whether that's in golf courses or that's in hiking or that's in whatever it is, there's lots of things that are changing. And I suppose that's the other thing I would like to say. I've said it many times before, but as much as possible, reach out and view other people's issues with this government. That's where you can change mind. I have seen too many comments recently of talking about the gun laws, but I'm never going to vote for Labor again. I have to say, I shake my head to a fair degree. Why were you voting for them to start off with? The problem is because of that. But it's good to see people are changing, but it does need a connection to do this. Unfortunately, it needs a direct connection. If you can try and do the research on what's actually happening with, okay, you've got someone who loves going and camping out, that's what they do. They've got their camper trailer and they go off and do this sort of stuff, and they do that periodically. Well, you can let them know. There is research to find out that camping trailers are being locked off, areas are being shut down, beaches are being chained off. Things that are really happening via this government through, and there's other things going on there, I'm not getting into it, but you talk to them about what they're doing and what we should do, that will start to change things. So that's one of the things we do. Like I said, voting. Now, the bit I want to talk about with voting is I've learned a fair bit of voting too. And that is that the preferential vote system is more powerful than I thought it was. I thought preferential voting was just a good way to end up with all the votes going to one of the 2 parties. No, that's all it really was. There is a video I'll attach below, a guy doing through and explains things. He's talking national and then the national vote and then the state vote side of things, but going through with preferential voting. He explains it properly. But the simple thing is that the preferential voting can be, if you do it properly, you do the research, understand the parties, understand what's going on, then you do have the power to change things. Enough people do it, and actually, I suppose that I talk about there's obviously support from the SSAA with Nationals, and I think that's good. I also know the Nationals are attached to the Liberals, and I don't particularly trust the Liberals. I suppose where I'd go with this, and I'll go into it in more detail later on, is that I am very much, and the only way I can explain that, I can't tell you what you should do whatsoever, but what I can explain is that my honest feelings on the situation is that our strongest way forward, if the voting works out where Labor doesn't have the majority, so it has some issues to deal with it, if Liberal in but doesn't have a majority, the majority thing is what we don't want. We don't want either of the parties with a major majority. So my way of doing things would be to go with the Freedom First parties, and that includes what was Shooters and Fishers, now is SFFP, and then the One Nation. There's a few of them. You have to do the research, but going for the parties that are interested in not having a larger government, in having a smaller government, in free speech, in Free Australia, they are also people that every time you get into it support firearms. Single purpose voting or single issue voting, I don't believe is the way forward. It ends up fragmented, it doesn't end up with any strength. But if we can get to where you basically put your preferences around that area, and then it comes out of your top area preferences to the Nationals being the top of that lot, down, and then down to people say put Labor last, I sort of agree, but listen, the Greens or the Teals or whatever it is, they are even worse than that. So they're right down the bottom. The Labor's just above them, would be my opinion. Once again, that's not what I shouldn't, and I'm not trying to tell you how to vote. That's how we're going to vote. But watch that video so you understand preferential voting and understand that with enough of us doing that, we do have some real power in that situation. And it is about, by the way, it is about you get enough of a turn, it does affect enough in that place. We get a seat of someone in the upper house of where there isn't a majority to either of the majors, and we get enough of one of those parties that is then going to hold them into account, then things will really matter. And I suppose on that, what's the real strategy of the political situation? How's this going to work out? The big deal which we would hope to happen, and I really believe there's a reasonable percentage of, is to get it to where when they go to put that across, when they go to make this actually a law, is that the Parliament, someone stands up and says this needs to go back for basically to be hashed out across the Parliament. It needs to go back through Parliament again. It needs a review because it is not functional. So that's all that needs to actually happen. And there is a reasonable chance of that. If we can get it to go to it goes back to review, then it can be properly discussed, and then they can go through and work out what makes sense and what doesn't. So much of this is just a wish list. It is just a wish list, in my mind, to make it so too hard to own a firearm. In what they've actually put forward, sort of sounds like it's all the things that would make them safer and that sort of stuff, but it's not. Not only is it not really implementable, they don't have the police force, they don't have the structure to do this. There's so many things that aren't in play, but it also it doesn't work. It's not actually benefiting the police force either. It's quite a mess. So in that format, if they can get to where it goes back to Parliament, then it can be hashed out. Thrown out, listen, rewritten, whatever it is, but once it's hashed out, once it has to go across the floor, and at each point, each amendment, each act, each part of the act has to go through proper scrutiny, which it has not been, as all our laws should be. The WA government's done it with other things as well, but just tried to jam it through. We get it through no other reason than that it was just jammed through, and there's too much stuff that doesn't make sense. We need to put it through so it makes sense, so it doesn't become a anchor for the police department as well, and the legal system as well. Then that's what we've got. Then we can take a step forward. And then beyond that point, as for the firearms community, and I suppose all of the free West Australian communities, the ones that are being hammered by this, whether it's the car clubs or the four-wheel drives or the hikers or all the things we've been through before, all the bits and pieces that are all getting pressured. If we can use this as a real wake-up call, not to go back to sleep with, it doesn't matter to you anymore, then start to do some positive stuff. Whether that's rallies in that place when you're not part of a propaganda mission that the government's on, whether that's, as I've said, positive advertising, do pro-advertising, this side of things, but more than anything, combine. Get together and see if we combine. There is other places in the world where the likes of the Labor Party, the likes of the major parties are getting hammered, and that things change. So as for the long-term future, there's all sorts of other details involved with this, but I suppose I'll finish on this where I sort of finished before, or what I said before, is try not to worry about it. Now, there's a bit of pushback I got on that. People saying, you don't have to worry because you've got different licenses, or do I worry, I've got to give up my firearms. No, I'm not saying that at all. I know there's a lot to be concerned about, but there's an old proverb, I don't know how it probably goes, but that is, worrying about yesterday is just destroying today. Worrying about tomorrow is just destroying today. You have to live in the present, plan for the future, work out a plan, yes, I'm not saying there's not something to be concerned about it, but just worrying about it, stressing about it is not productive for anyone, not you the most. So, and as for what to do, planning side of things, as to go forward, the guys, well, what have you left me? If I don't know what the regulations are, I don't know what to do, what are you saying, just give my firearms up? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, have a plan. So worst case scenario, This all gets in, Labor gets in the majority, the rules land on the 28th of March or whenever it is, the rules actually hit there. You've had 3 weeks in the middle there, and that's a terrible thing to talk about, 3 weeks to do everything, but you do have 3 weeks. You're not going to be a criminal, you're not going to be arrested. If the absolute worst happens, and for the guys, by the way, that say, oh, never give up, you never give up your guns, this isn't the case of just, you never give up your guns, so they just ignore you. In our state, the way things are, if we don't comply, they will arrest you. We will go to jail. We will lose all our firearms forever unless something changes. So it's not a simple move like that. So for those people who want to say all that sort of stuff, I get your rhetoric, I get your principles, but really you give up your whole life for that firearm in a situation that if you stay there and we fight properly, we can get it back. I'll leave that one for you guys. For us, what I'm really saying is, if the worst case scenario happens, and I'm not banking on the worst case scenario happening, but if it happens, there is a way out of jail. You can trot them into a dealer and do that side of things, hand them over, and it's done instantly, if you really needed to. I hope that doesn't ever have to happen. But working out a plan, you know that. Talk to the dealer, talk to that sort of stuff, talk to those people, work out a plan. So you can just relax about it and not stress about it. It's not something I have to worry about the police come and arrest me on the day after the election. No, that's not going to happen. As for the bigger picture of stuff, there will be a grace period to go with everything. There will be a decent level of a grace period. In that grace period will not only be you have a chance to do things, whether that's safes or whatever it is, you'll have a chance to do things. There will also be the point of legal contesting. Until this is law, until it is actable or until it is acted, it can't be legally contested. So the likes of class actions, the likes of all that sort of stuff are all going to ensue once, if this just goes straight through. But with an ounce of luck, but with an ounce of common sense, what will actually happen, also in my mind, the incentive to get this act, using this act, the incentive disappears after the election. There is the incentive from the police force that don't want guns out there, but political incentive, there's 4 years before it's happened. What's happened. So that incentive disappears. So to actually put it back to, we'll put it back across the floor again, because it's after the election. It's not winning any votes anymore. So I put a reasonable amount of hope in the fact that that's what's going to happen. In some form or other, there will be enough of a change. Labor's messed it up enough to not have a majority. And then in that process there, no, we want to put it back for review. There's a decent chance of that. So as for what actually happens, I don't know. We live in a crazy world. I'm trying to give some positive side of things there as there are more regulations. Like I said, you want the answer on the regulations? No one can tell you at this moment, because it doesn't even exist at the moment, because it hasn't been interpreted by the police force by the members of the police force that have to interpret. It hasn't even happened yet. So there isn't a proper answer there, but there is hope. There really is. As for any action between now and then, just understand that game plan. Understand that game plan. Make them a perceived threat. Build them up as the bad guy. Say all the time how we've been pushing them back and we've been getting them off the streets and we've been fighting that sort of stuff here. And that's all the game plan for the 6th or the 8th of March, whatever it is, when the election is. It's for there. So the next 60 days is extraordinarily crucial. And I can't think of a way, maybe someone can, but I can't think of a way to make our side better, more positive, less a negative, I should say, less used as a part of the propaganda tool. That which moves into talking like this, yes, we can do, supporting each other, working with each other where we can. As for beyond that point, you got to be super careful. I certainly am nervous over this next period, and certainly if you've got mates that are on the edge or know that sort of stuff, then reach out to them. It's hard, a lot of people, but there's still light at the end of the tunnel. There's still a decent chance of it not disappearing, but certainly coming back to something that makes sense. Anyway, guys, that was a long ramble. I get it. I've tried to put all the information I can think of in there. There's probably more bits and pieces I could go through, but that's trying to do it as thoroughly as I can. That's the reason it's so long. I hope it helps. Thanks for checking in. We'll catch you next time.